Hi guys, in this video I'm going to show you how I set up a project template in Energy XT that's going to save me a lot of time for working on music. What I like to do is create a project template so that I can load up that base project each time. Now this really helps when I'm working on a long form project like an EP or an album, so that I can pull in all of the same send effects and starting instruments. I can change anything about this as I move from song to song, but setting up the template will give me a rough starting point for each time and kind of save a lot of time just in setting up all of the effects and everything else. Let's jump in and I'll show you what I mean. So here we are in Energy XT just as it loads up. Usually there's a welcome screen, something like this if you start a new project here. And I have just chosen an empty project because I've made changes on my default project already. I want to show you most likely what you will see when you open a new project. Here we are. A couple of things that I want to do right away and save, and even the window locations and things like this will be saved in your template when you save it. I like to be able to see the object bar, which is right up here, and the mixer strip. Now, it doesn't look like much has changed here other than made these gray windows slightly larger. But once we get content in here, this is going to show me a lot of options that normally would be hidden from me. I'd have to drop these down later on. So I just like to pull those windows out and get them ready right away. What I'm thinking about is the kinds of instruments that I'm going to use for a long-term project. And I want to start working on something that's kind of a hip-hop oriented R&B kind of sounds. So I'm going to pull in some starting instruments that I can change the sounds on from project to project, but at least will get me the devices, whether they're VSTs or samplers or whatever, to be able to start loading in sounds once I start making music. So I'm going to go into my samples folder. I know that I'm going to want a kick, so I'm just going to grab a kick, not necessarily thinking this is the particular kick I'm going to use on every song, but just by doing this, it will create the sampler with that sample on it. I can then go in and change the sample in that machine each time, but it's just fewer steps the next time I load it up. I actually happen to really like this kick, so I know that I'm probably going to be using it on multiple beats. So I'll also go ahead and rename some of these things. This channel is going to be called Kick, and I could even start doing some pre-mixing in here, just knowing that I'm not going to want any sound at full volume, so I can pull down my volume right there. I also know that I'm going to want a clap or some kind of snare sound, so I'm just going to grab really simple sounds to start out with. I'll go ahead and rename this as well. And I want to show you what's happening over in the mixer as well. So here in the sequencer, these are sequencer channels. The built-in drum sequencer or sampler adds these samples in under the sequencer tab right up here. Also, I don't need all of these inputs and outputs, so I can actually get rid of some of these. And I can rename them. Again, just doing this once and then making it either my default or a template that I can load in saves me a lot of time. So I'll delete these extra outputs. If you have a different interface or want to use multiple audio devices within Energy XT, you could set this all up as well in the mixer, so you can have your default routing already done. I could even go ahead and choose some colors here for these tracks. I like blue for my drums, so I can color them in here. All right, I know that I'm going to want some send effects, so I'm going to use my multi-effects right here. I want a reverb, and after the reverb, I want to have a delay. Maybe the delay should come first. Yeah. On the mixer page, I can EQ these send effects. So here's my delay and my reverb. I like to EQ these, so I'm rolling off some of the low end, so that's not constantly reverberating, eating up headroom. So I'll EQ the first band and the fourth band on each of these. I also like to bring the really, really highs down just to dampen those a little bit. You can adjust your EQ curve as well right in here. So I'm just using the built-in EQ. There's an EQ all ready for you to use. It's a 4-band EQ on every single channel in Energy XT. I don't have to use a separate plugin for it. It's a very small graph, but it does give you a very good representation, and you can see the numbers actually too. of what frequencies you're going to be affecting. All right, so I've got a kick, I've got a clap, I can also go into the actual devices here, the delay and the reverb, and I already know that I'm going to want to set up my delay here, timing left and right, to be like this. So I can set that once. And my reverb, I like the default settings that it gives me for a send effect reverb. I also like to add an insert on my send effect. This might sound weird, but it gives anything then that I run through a reverb. So like a snare, I like to have a little bit of reverb. I want the wet signal to sound different from the dry signal. I also just like to be able to give it a little bit of a boost so I don't have to send quite as much signal to the reverb or the delay to really be able to hear it. And one of the things that I like to use on it is the Ruby tube. It adds a little bit of drive to that effect, makes it a little bit more audible without it having to be so loud. I usually put this on the limiter setting, put my drive up right about here, and then I can clone. I'll just do this again. I can set it once like this, and then clone that effect by holding Control and dragging it over to my other mixer strip right there. Really, really fast way of being able to set a BST plugin effect, and then you can clone it and its settings to another channel. And the Ruby tube is one that I use a lot. In fact, I'll probably end up using it on the kick and clap. But for this template, I'll normally just pull in the sample or the sound so that it creates the device and do some basic setups, things that I normally would do no matter what project I'm working on. All right, so I've got a couple of samples here. I could also grab a hi-hat. I know that I'm going to want a hi-hat. And I'm going to grab a closed one and an open one. And if I drag underneath this sample right inside this new drum sampler, it will add to this drum sampler rather than creating a new drum sampler. So now I've got two hi-hat samples in the same drum sampler. And this is usually how I like to set up my drum kits. A kick in one drum sampler. And these built-in devices, the drum sampler device is so lightweight, it's basically doing nothing. So you can use as many instances of this drum sampler as you want inside Energy XT. And I've never had a problem with it. It's fantastic. All right, so then I'll rename this. I just use HH for hi-hat. And what I like about having my hi-hats in the same drum sampler is that I can assign them to a mute group, which allows me to choke just like you would do on an actual hi-hat. If you're playing it and then you close it down, it chokes the sound. And these are really kind of shrill for my ears, so I know that already I could go into the EQ, and any hi-hats that I would pull in here, I know that I'm going to roll off a lot of low end. I'm also going to roll off some high end here. And in the built-in drum sampler, we can also adjust the cutoff. So I like just to bring that down a little bit. And I'll just make that the same blue color for our drums as well. So now we've got a kick, clap, a couple of hi-hats, a couple of send effects already EQ'd, giving them a little bit of saturation as well, just so they sound different from the source that we're sending to our send effects. The other thing that I'm going to want to have is some groups or some buses. I can do that in the mixer just by adding group, and I'm going to add 1, 2, 3, 4 group channels, and I can rename them right in here as well. I'll rename this one, the first one I rename drums. The second one I'll rename bass. And then I'll rename this one keys. In other projects, I may end up renaming some of these, but I'm sort of arranging all of the routing by kind of frequency range. So drums and percussion, and then bass are all my low end. The keys are more like mid-range, so I could run guitars through there as well. Just a way of helping me logically think about the mix and what should be routed where so that I can affect it all kind of in a similar way. And the last one I rename effects, and I use this bus for sending any sort of cymbal rolls or transition sounds through that. If I have projects that will have vocals, they will get their own bus as well. That's something that I may set up later on, or have a separate template for projects that I know that I'm going to have some kind of vocal element to them. So already this is quite a bit of work that I don't have to do over and over again now. So anytime that I want to load up something that's, say, intended to be something that's hip hop or R&B related, or something that I know, will work with this kind of starting point, I can load up this template and save myself a load of time. Now I could also go in here and really begin to start sculpting the different sounds. I could pull in some different instruments, maybe some things that I know that I use a lot. I've gone ahead and added in a few more elements, thinking that I'm probably going to be using some of these things multiple times. So to review, I've got a kick drum, I've got a clap, I've got a couple hi-hats, I've got an 808 or some kind of bass instrument here. I pulled in some horns. A string sample. Some cellos. And I'm using 4-front piano. In the mixer, I've added just a couple of inserts, some things that I know that I like to use. For example, on my bass, I like to use this Tal tube amp simulator, and some more Ruby tube on my drums and synthesizers. So what I do then is I save this as, go to Save As, and I've called it just Template, so that I can load up this project in the future, start working, and then of course rename it for whatever that song is or the project that I'm working on. But it gives me a huge leap forward, a great starting point, already even doing a little bit of mixing with some of the elements that I have added in here. But doesn't limit me too much as far as the concept of what I'm making. It just provides me basically with an arsenal of instruments right at my fingertips, already loaded up and ready for me to go, that I also know sound good, and I've routed them where I want them to go. So that's going to save me a lot of time. And that's how you can create a template for yourself. If there's things that you find you reach for often, certain plugins that you use or insert effects, etc., or certain routings, you can set all of that up, save it as a template. You could even, for example, if there are certain routings or plugins that you like to use in everything, you can even set that as your default project right up here from the file menu. And if you choose that, when you go to the new screen, you can choose default from right in here. When you select your projects here, just select default, and that will become your new default project. For me, I'm going to open recent and choose template, and here's what we just had set up. Everything's ready for me. It's all good to go. There are other things that you could do, like MIDI routings. You could route certain instruments through certain devices of your hardware, and that will all be set in your template as well. So hope this helps save you some time in setting up project templates. Most likely this will work in other digital audio workstations as well. See what kind of features that it has for you for saving you time by setting up a template for yourself. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.